Hello, everyone. How's it going, out there? Hopefully, our audio is in good working order. Let us know in the chat if you can hear us. My name is Justin Jeffress, and this is Allison Atwell. Allison, please introduce yourself.
Hello. Hello. I'm Allison. I work on Alexa Skills Kit with 3P developers to design amazing skills. Some you've maybe heard of, some you maybe haven't heard of that we might talk about along the way. But what are we here to talk about, Justin?
Yes, I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about this. So, we have been collaborating on a project together. I don't know let's see, I think we started it's been a while. I know I started streaming on my personal channel, building this out back in April. But this is a collaboration between three of us at Amazon: Allison, Joe Moyo, and myself. And we built a simulation game with Alexa that simulates raising a cactus. Um, so, um, like there's different things that you can do, like watering the cactus, opening and closing the blinds to give it some light because it's inside your house. Or and Allison worked on building out the overall design. I worked on the main part of the skill, and Joe worked on all of the web API for game stuff. Joe's not here today, but he will definitely be on in future streams talking about the work that he did.
Yeah. So we're gonna be here for a while. Actually, we're gonna talk about all the stuff you're gonna learn and everything. So yeah, why don't we pull up the goodies and take a look at the schedule and everything? But
Sure.
yes, we to for a little bit of context, we right now maybe some of these people are even in the chat are mysterious beta testers. We already have a small version of the skill running with just a few beta testers. You'll be able to sign up for that later once we're ready and once we've developed it a little bit more. But we're going to share with you the design process that we've used so far, and then we're also going to take your input. We're going to be sharing some resources with you to help you along that process, but we're just going to be talking through it. And today, we're going to take some more ideas for the skill and talk about our ideas that we already have, which is step one of that entire process. So you're going to come along for the ride with us.
Yes.
So yeah, we're going to share a process. Of course, we picked a simulator skill because that's a very sticky skill. It's easy to understand. It's gonna be something that's gonna be fun to share with you. You are going to have code samples. In fact, there's one up right now. Whoops, sorry for the slide flipping. Here's the schedule. Justin, do you want to talk about the schedule in the next several weeks?
Yes. We have, like I said, we are kicking off a 10 or 12 part series. Let's see, is this the right button? There we go.
That's the name of the series. Is this the right button?
I just wanted to make sure because, we were overlapping the last item on the list there. So I wanted to be able to make sure that I could hide our cameras. Yes, it's a 12-part series, and we're going to be doing 2 streams per week every Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So mark your calendars. So that'll be our consistent streaming. So today we're going to be talking about the skill, going through scoping out what it is, the overall idea that we came up with, and the process that we used to do the design. And then in the next episode, we'll actually be creating our storyboards. And so rather than creating and using a flowchart to map out the experience, we created storyboards to map this out. And we're gonna actually, like, on the next stream, attempt to like create some flowcharts to show how difficult it is to model voice with flowcharts. So flowcharts are great for some things, right? Like for making like determinate decisions for the state of the game. Perfect use case for that. But for voice, it's restricting, and so we're using storyboards to do that. And we'll talk about the process that we did to take these storyboards that Allison created and convert them into the actual code that we've created. So we've talked about storyboarding in the past, and the question that we often get is, okay, now that I've received these storyboards from my designer, how do I actually build a skill from it? So we're actually going to go through, tear down the code, and I'll point out the parts like, okay, see this particular design asset that Allison built. This is the code that does this thing. So I think it's going to be, I'm really excited to show you this because it's the first time we're showing the whole approach from starting with the design asset to building a skill. We'll be through the next few weeks going through. Oh, and I think I just now noticed the last item on that list says 11/18 launch party and play session. That should be 12/18. So that's
Yeah.
December.
Haven't you heard, just I maybe forgot to mention this, but time travel, we need to figure that out for the skill for that time.
Right.
So I forgot to make a storyboard for that. Sorry.
Right. Cool. All right. So
So yeah, let's sorry, I'm looking all over the place here.
no
So
worries.
yeah, we're gonna break down. Let's just break down what we're gonna learn into in what Justin just said. We're gonna start today by talking about skills that have multiple uses per day for an extended period of time, which is really kind of the ultimate goal when we're building a skill, especially a game. There's no reason that it shouldn't have super high retention. And how does that affect the design? So we're going to talk a lot about that in the next few days. We're also going to talk about how, also what Justin touched on, is how we design for a really big state problem, a simulator. We're simulating life here, people. This isn't going to be simple. So, and then also translating that design into actual code, and you will both receive in a GitHub repo that we mentioned earlier, both the code and the storyboards. So you'll be able to see our thought process end to end. So
Yes, and if you please go back to the other slide. If you go to that URL, alexa.design/my-cactus, that will take you to this repository here, which is on the official Alexa GitHub channel or org on GitHub, and you can actually follow along. And Joe and I actually have been building out the skill on our personal channels. So if you go to twitch.tv/just Jeffress, you can tune in every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm actually on streaming myself building the skill. I've been debugging and doing some stuff during some of the beta stuff, and then Joe on typically Thursday, Friday does his stream where he works on building out the web API for games portion of the skill. So you can view and tune into Joe's streams on twitch.tv/JoeMoCode. So that is this repo here. So if you want to follow along and see, what the skill looks like and look at the code, you can, check this out. So I'm going to switch back over to your screen, Allison, and we can continue on.
sweet. Well, let's switch the slide first of all. So let's talk. I'm going to call this scope. We could come up with some other fancy name for it. We could come up with a cactus theme name for it if we wanted to. But we're going to decide what the skill features are what features are our skill going to have, because like I said, we're simulating life, albeit it's a simple life. We could get really fancy with it, and frankly, I don't have that much time. I don't know how much time you have on your hands, but it's not that much. So let's talk about what we wanted to do. And to talk about what we want to do, we want to work backward from what our players are actually going to find most compelling. So what do we know today about skills that tell us these are sticky experiences? Players and users and customers of all kinds keep coming back to them. Why is that? So we always try to be Faster, easier, or more fun. So since we're talking about a game, we want to think about what is going to make our game probably more fun with Alexa than it would on with any other technology or any other kind of interaction. What about using our voice is going to make this special? Of course, if I could just tell my dog to walk herself, it would be a lot easier to take care of her. So yeah, it's going to be easier to take care of a cactus with my voice. If I could tell the plants to water themselves, that would be easier. Um, so I think we're hitting it there. And then yeah, it's faster. I watered my cacti the other day, and it took me about an hour to get them all. So if I could just ask Alexa to do it, that would be lovely.
Right.
Um,
And when you
but
say water your cacti, you mean like the physical ones that are in your room, like the one that's over your shoulder.
yes, I'm not actually a beta tester yet on the skill, so no, I do mean my actual cacti. So there and while we're talking about this, definitely think back to some experiences maybe you've had with Alexa or some other interaction that really stuck with you. So we want to make a connection with people. This is a house plant after all. And we'll actually talk about why we chose a cactus later, but we chose a simulator because there are some inherently sticky mechanisms in a simulator, and it was something good to build off of, among a host of other reasons. Also, because we would like you to take the code and make your own simulator. And a cactus is really simple. I'd like to see everybody else get really fancy with it. So we want to keep it simple. But really, there are some things that drive people to continue interacting with a skill and in general with things around them. So we want to surprise and delight people. Cacti are delightful. We can work with that. I think we can come up with some features that can surprise and delight. Um, we want people to feel like they are invested in and they own something that drives interaction. Having a sense of accomplishment, you keep coming back to something if you keep feeling accomplished or like you're learning something, so your cactus keeps growing. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment or something, that cacti grow very slow in real life. Our game cacti, I think, Justin, we talked about, we're going to talk about the actual growth mechanisms and things like that later, but we sped up the growth a little bit from your typical cactus. But I find it very rewarding when I do notice they've grown. So
Yes,
yeah.
and one thing about that was interesting about the whole scoping exercise is this originally, like, the idea, Allison and I came together to discuss and figure out, like, how our overall goal with this project was to demonstrate storyboarding and how to build a skill end to end using this mechanism, and also to create an interesting experience, right? So that's one of the reasons Allison was touching upon just earlier, like why we're thinking about a simulation. And Joe, when we started talking about the idea, Joe was like, "Hey, I need to like build something that demonstrates the web API for games," and he was thinking about building a simulator for that. So it's like, "Hey, we have similar interests. We're working on a similar project. Let's combine forces and build this." And so when Joe came in and we started explaining to him his idea, we got some new ideas added into our scope. And one of the things that Joe brought up was that he's accidentally overwatered several cacti that he's owned, and so that's one of the things that made it into the game, is like to be that you could accidentally overwater your cactus and it's game over. So
Yep.
that's another cool thing, is like your not only is your scope determined upon like what the thing that you're trying to design, but it's also determined upon the members of your team that you're working with the design on, right? So as soon as we brought a new person into the
Yep.
mix, we got some new ideas into the design, which yeah, that was really fun.
Yes. Yes. Um, so that also, we originally did have graphics planned for the game, and we're going to talk about APL, and we had already started APL, but then we switched immediately to web API when he showed interest as well. So simulators, by the way, I'm a pretty strong believer in them, although there really aren't, I don't think there are enough out there, which is also why I really want everybody to kind of take this code and make it their own, because right there we just made, something pretty complex out of something that was really simple, with just that little scope tweak. So when you're thinking about what you're going to support, actually have those conversations early too with, okay, so we have a watering mechanism. It's either at zero, it's on a spectrum, but we just added a whole new dynamic to it, as well. So that is also nice to know in the scoping phase. So also we there tying into surprise and delight, we have a little bit of like satisfying your curiosity. So we will be building a feature in where if you've actually made the cactus pretty happy and it's healthy, you will get a little bit of cactus wisdom that you're going to see later on. So you are rewarded, but it's also like you want to keep coming back to see what it's going to say next. You also see this at work, in skills like maybe since we're getting into the holiday season, like NORAD Santa Tracker. If you ask your device, where's Santa, often you will get a different response on Christmas Day several different times, not Christmas Day, Christmas Eve several different times. So if you check back, you are highly rewarded for doing that on Christmas Eve. That's what building a skill for high retention is about. So that's what we're talking here about, a sticky skill. So what what other kinds of things stick with us? Justin, do you have one, some kind of experience, or I have one about Alexa that, and if anybody has one in the chat, sometime where she might have surprised you, or maybe some other experience surprised you. What was sticky about it?
That's a good question. Cold Zulu in the chat. Sorry. Gold Zulu says special bonus for those who get Sharpie Sharp. So before I answer that question, I just want to address this comment that Gold Zulu made. So when I started building the skill on my personal channel, I wanted to involve the community as much as possible, and we came up with, I have a cactus name generator. So like when you start the skill, it randomly chooses a name for the cactus. And so I started asking people in the chat, like, hey, what are some names for, the cactus? And I'll add them into our cactus name pool to pull stuff out. And so Gold Zulu's contribution was a cactus named Sharpie Sharp. And so every time I'm on the stream and I have to get a new cactus for some reason, I'm always like, let's see if we get Sharpie Sharp. And we got it one time on naturally from a random number generator to pull that
Amazing.
out. So
And we're going to talk about how we designed and built all of that
yes.
too when we go into the component deep dive.
Yes.
So my little delighter sticky moment was, actually just after I started working on Amazon, and I asked my device to sing me a song, just randomly. I have a habit of trying something new or trying a new skill every single day, with the product. I keep avoiding saying the A word because I realized I forgot to mute one of my devices. I can see it across the room. So I'm going to keep awkwardly talking around that, because I messed up. But anyway, I asked her to sing me a song, and it was one of the songs that were specially recorded, and it was about how great technology is, and it ends with like 3 cheers with technology. And I followed up by saying that was beautiful, and she said, I expected no response back from Alexa because I was just kind of running my mouth at her. And she responds back, she goes, thank you, people tell me I'm a natural. It's like, thought humor, perfect. And that was one of those moments that was really sticky, and that was a reward for me kind of following my curiosity. So we're going to talk about those moments when we're doing the storyboards, how many times we actually branched off into these little delighter moments just because it was the fun thing to do. It was the right thing to do for the experience. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. So going back to our basic concept that we're going to start with, and then we're going to talk about kind of brainstorming. We want this to be easy to play. Again, we want everyone to kind of take this and run with it and make their own simulators out of it. We're starting really simple, but we hope people build on it. And then, of course, this is simulators. Let's be real. There are a wealth of opportunities to monetize one. So that came up in our scope conversation right away.
Yes.
Was I immediately, obviously, I would say immediately, I want more than one cactus. But that is a lot of work to make that happen in the skill logistically, actually. And in the
Yes.
design, now I have to manage via my voice two cacti, and I have to understand what's going on with both of them. And I possibly don't even have a device with a screen. So we haven't addressed that yet, but there are infinite ways that we could monetize the skill. We could have like I'm just going to start brainstorming, like throwing ideas out there now, like fertilizer to make it grow faster, increase the
Right.
growth rate.
And some of
Hire a
these,
house sitter so you can neglect the skill for 20 days, and somebody will come by and water your cactus. Go on.
yeah, and yeah, it's funny because if you took a look at like our notes from our first brainstorming session, we had a lot of great ideas about this, and we ended up having to scale back because it's like there's no way that we're going to be able to like do all of this and implement all of this because this isn't our full-time job. So
Yep.
this could become easily a full-time job if we wanted to implement every feature. But one of the other things that we thought of was like, ooh, we could do like a multiplayer component, which sort of along the same vein where you could go and visit your friend's cactus and like water it on their behalf. So
Right.
there were some things that we were thinking about along those lines, and um, not only just monetization but other things like making the skill aware of your current location, and then basing the weather in the game dependent upon your location. So
Right.
like, oh, okay, like if the user grants the skill permission to be able to view the profile and get the zip code, you could use the zip code to then look up like, oh, okay, it's nighttime here, so now that it's nighttime, you want to have the blinds closed to keep the cactus warm. If it's daytime, you want to have them open to maximize the warmth and the sunlight that it receives to grow, right? So it's like all
Yep.
these different things, and it's like these are really cool ideas, but it's going to take a lot more to implement them. And the cool thing is, like when we were streaming and working on on our private channels, like building out the skill, people who were tuning in were like, hey, it'd be cool if like there was this idea and that idea. And it was fun because some of the ideas that people suggested to us, it's like, oh yeah, we had thought about that, but we decided to scale back. And then we also got some other new ideas as well, from the community. I think it's you know like that's a part of the design phase, is figuring out like what are the cool ideas and what's feasible. And you kind of have to evaluate each one of those as you're going through the thing. So yeah, I guess we should move into our next question here to the to
Yeah.
the to the viewers.
Yeah. So, I mean, we intentionally started, we had this conversation because we wanted to put this out in the world for basically steal the skill, make it your own. We wanted to start really simple with something that was like kind of an obvious answer, but easy to understand. So we went with a cactus. Like we could have gone with a house plant, but we just happened to be sitting in a lounge at work that had a bunch of cacti and succulents that day, and no surprise, I have an affinity for cacti, so that's what we went with, because it's not a complicated, like, in order to meet basic expectations, which is a very important scope conversation to have. First and foremost is what are our basic expectations of what it's like to do this thing. So if we were to pick something that were a bit more complicated to simulate, but we went with a very simple scope, we might actually just kind of insult our players by kind of violating their expectations of what they should have been able to do. For example, if I were to simulate, raising a pet, that's like a dog, that's going to be different. I have to feed it and give it water, and I have to take it for a walk and give it a bath. And if I don't do those things in my skill, why bother?
Right. And then
There will be a basic expectation. So we wanted to keep basic expectations low, but still be very engaging.
right, yeah, and then you get into more complicated things with that scenario, such as teaching it tricks, right? Like
Right.
how do you train it? And
Right.
over time,
Because
does
why
it
get a
like
dog if you can't play with it? But playing with
right,
it is a complicated gaming mechanism, right?
right, and how do you like simulate the bond that you form between the dog over time, right? Because and depending upon the different dog breeds, some breeds are more likely to bond with you more quickly than others, and
You
some
see, you can get so fancy with this. It's a
right,
great idea.
right.
I
So
love this aquarium idea, Little Defeat, where you can walk around the show 10. Um, and of course, I think we all have research to do with web API for games, honestly. I think that's a great idea, is having an aquarium. That's another one that's like, you can get pretty fancy with it, but also my basic expectations of raising a fish are not necessarily that complicated. So you could actually focus your energies not on, oh, I have to figure out how to simulate walking the dog. You can simulate more fun things, especially when it comes to that screen interaction. I think that would be a really fun simulation. That's a great idea. We talked about other simulations too. There's, of course, the world famous simulation, Farmville. God, sorry, I blanked because I was also thinking of the name of the farming simulation skill, which is My Farm, which I think you can actually is still live in the skill store that you can try. So that simulates a farm. I once worked on an internal project where we were experimenting with writing a simulation if you're trapped on a deserted island, all kinds of stuff. So
yes.
it doesn't have to be growing something. It could be simulating solving a problem, building a society. Of course, I was a middle school girl in the 90s, so I played a lot of The Sims. Obvious answer there. Yeah,
So, one other fun thing to mention about like, the why we ended up landing upon cacti, there was also, if you remember, we were having a discussion one day, and you sent me this, I don't know if it was a GoFundMe or something, but it was like a potted plant, or actually it was a pot for a plant that like based upon like the conditions of the soil, the amount of water that was in it, like it would show like a happy face or a sad face that denoted like, oh hey, this your plant needs attention. And so we were thinking about like also using that sort of idea as, hey, maybe we could have like some indicators on the screen that indicate the cactus is in good health
right.
or bad health. And part of the original design documents, which we'll share in a later stream, we were using APL at the time because we hadn't Joe hadn't joined the project at that time to work on the web API for games portion. We had like, okay, if the wallpaper color turns like red, that means the cactus needs attention. If the wallpaper color is like green, that means it's a green thumb, right? Like we're doing well. So we had thought about like, not only you know about the voice first approach of the voice feedback and the cactusisms that you'll hear when the cactus is doing well, but also the beyond voice portion, like how do we give some visual indicators to help the viewer, or not really the viewer, but the player understand at a glance what's going on within the context of the skill.
Right, right. And oh gosh, we're gonna talk. I'm excited to talk about GUI already. So I'm actually gonna flip over to brainstorm mode on my screen, and we're actually gonna write some of this stuff down and continue this conversation. So 1 second while I adjust.
All right.
Try to get as much real estate back on my screen as possible while I layer a bunch of stuff.
Cool.
So,
I'll switch back over to screen when you're ready.
all right, I think we're good.
Cool.
So again, what we were just talking about, so we've got our, let's, the way this typically works is we would be in the same room, which we actually were in the before time when we came up with this skill. This is how long ago we started this skill. We could meet in person and talk about it. I remember back when we could brainstorm in person without a mask. But way back when we were talking about when this would eventually become some kind of official document that would become our design requirements. And when we go in to write our script, I'm going to write our script to fulfill all of these design requirements, all of these, basically, I would call them CX requirements, everything that the skill needs to support. So this activity is essentially we're agreeing on the thing we're going to build and then some goals that we're going to meet. Justin and I talked about goals that we're going to meet. We're going to share the skill on GitHub. We'd really like to see a lot of branches off of that code. If we've inspired you, we've done our job correctly. So this is that time that we're going to set all of those goals. We're going to make our CX requirements. And when we start writing on Friday, we're going to have those in front of us. So right now we have nothing in front of us. So let's fix that. So basic expectations, y'all. What am I going to expect of this skill, raising a cactus? I mean, obviously it needs water. It doesn't have a ton of water needs, but it needs water. And then let's get into sunlight. We need water and sunlight. That's this basic photosynthesis.
Right.
That's our life process that we're simulating here. I define, and this is a more traditional like UX definition of a simulation. I guess I picked up to some degree in design school where we are simulating a process. We are building components of that process to simulate an overall process. So we have a watering process and we have a sun process that simulates the photosynthesis process that simulates growth process, to get super nerdy about it. So if you're simulating a household, a la The Sims, you've got a lot of other processes happening there. You have relationships you're simulating, trash decomposing that you're simulating, all kinds of things. So we've got water and we've got sunlight. But Justin, you mentioned opening and closing the blinds earlier. Tell me about that. How are we going to get our sunlight? How did we decide this?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were thinking about was like, hey, we've got where is this cactus, right? Is it in the garden or is it inside the person's house or residence or wherever they are? And so early on, we're like, yeah, this is an indoor cactus, right? It's our indoor cactus that we're raising. So
because we're from the Pacific Northwest. These aren't going to survive outside, honestly.
Right. So in that case, like, it's protected from the elements. But that means we have to go out and manage that, right? And so we have to give it light when it needs it, and we also need to make sure that it stays warm when it stays warm, right? And so we needed a mechanism to give the player the controls to let in light and keep in warmth during those specific times of the day. So yes, that open and close the blinds mechanism works such that during the day you need to have the window open to like basically allow that photosynthesis process to happen, and then at night you need to close the blinds to keep the cactus warm. And so that way it encourages the player to come back, because if you leave the blinds open overnight, like you actually get some negative like there's some like a component in the game where it will like decrement the health of the cactus over time if the blinds are left open at night. So there's a negative status effect. Yep. Likewise, if the blinds are closed during the day, you don't get the bonuses for having the cactus, the windows open.
Yeah. Now would be a good time to point out that at this stage, we also aren't really we aren't deciding exactly what mechanisms we're using, but actually we kind of fleshed this out in the beginning that we would have a couple of meters that were going to affect the health of the cactus, but it's not super necessary to flesh all of that out in the scoping phase. And in fact, you might change it like we did later on. So
Right.
we had a very long discussion after Joe joined the project, which I can't wait to share with you about all of the scoring mechanisms and everything and how we
Yes.
fine-tuned it. We don't really need that in the scope phase, but we do need, if it comes up, to discuss how potentially complicated we could make it. So
Right.
if somebody starts going into left field, we could say, hey, we're maybe reaching a little too far, or no, this is good. I like where this is going. So it's okay to start those conversations, but you don't necessarily need to make any decisions. And it's good to maybe leave a bit of wiggle room to refine them later, which we ended up doing. We spent quite a lot of time refining these. So
Right.
in general, though, to explain, we have an overall health meter, which is affected by all kinds of conditions, heat, cold, all that, and how much water there is. And then, of course, there's the water meter, which is what we landed on, but we'll talk about that stuff later.
Right. And one thing I want to point out during this brainstorming process that is, so, from coming at this from, my programming background, like, a part of my brain during these early conversations that we had, like, wanted to default to going to, how do I implement this? How do I implement this? And I kind of, had to, like, sort of manage that part of my brain and say, switch off, like, you know, like right now we're just coming up with lofty ideas. We'll figure out if that's possible to implement in the future. So that was one thing that I wanted to point out, like, in the early stages, like, try to not be like, if you have a bias towards, like, thinking about and limiting your design based upon what you think is technically possible, there is a time for that when you need to go through and evaluate what is possible and figure out what you can and can't do based upon not only scope but the technicality
Yep.
and the technical limitations. But there's a time and place for that, and during this early brainstorming phase, it's not the time to do that. That's
Yeah.
like, you come up with as
I
many
do
ideas as
that.
possible and then remove.
Yeah. I do that when I get to the point where I've actually written an official document that includes all of these things. That's the time where I start making those decisions, because I'm shopping it around to other stakeholders and people who know better than me, who can tell me you're crazy. And we can do that in the editing phase when we actually make this into, like, if you're making it into an official document, if you have a big team that's going to be working on something. If it's just you, of course, it is a healthy thing to do to put everything out there without any barriers, though. And then still, even if you're not going to draft something official, set aside a different editing phase, which we are going to do here in a few minutes, actually. So I'm going to actually write down some things that you said earlier, too. But another thing that we thought of is, okay, well, we've got water and sunlight. Is that really enough? And we had that discussion because we want to talk about the skill being sticky and having high retention. And if there's not enough to do in the skill, we want to accomplish that. We're trying to come up with features that we think will accomplish the goals that we just talked about. So we came up with the idea of feeding and food. And we didn't entirely flesh it out because it was a strange idea, but it could either be fertilizer or we could be raising a Venus flytrap, I suppose. There are some carnivorous plants, although I'm not aware of any carnivorous cacti. I could be wrong about that, but I'm not aware
Yeah.
of any. At least any that I can keep in captivity, or I would have found one by now. But we came up with the idea for feeding, and we will talk about in a minute when we scope down why that might have been something that we throw out. So we talked about that. And then we talked about rewards. What kind of rewards? So we want our cactus to grow over time. That might also involve arms. It is going to involve a growth rate. It's going to involve flowers. And then when we started talking about flowers, we started talking about badges, which is a pretty traditional gaming mechanism. Justin, you want to talk about badges, the kind of badges that we thought about? Because when we think about badges, that's actually going to be triggered by something. So this is worth including in our scope as well as rewards because those come with a tech lift.
Yeah, so one of the things we were thinking about is like, okay, how do we get people to keep coming back? And over the life of using the skill, like there's going to be things that you do, right? So like, we figured it's like, okay, you're gonna get badges that, sort of lure you in, sort of like, here are the things the first time you do something within the skill. But then we also wanted badges for like, things that you've done, that take a long time to do, right? So, we came up with some ideas of like, okay, maybe the first time you, like, oh, and also to encourage different types of behavior, right? So we have a badge called like the night owl badge. So that happens if you check the on your status of your cactus, just by looking at it, within a certain time span. I think it's like from midnight to like 4 a.m. or something like that. And then
Yeah.
there is the early bird badge for checking on the cactus at like 4 a.m. to like 6 or something like that. So it's like we had a couple badges for that because I just remembered like reading stories about people back when Farmville was really really popular of people setting alarms to like get up and check their farm early in the morning. So I was envisioning like
Right.
people like waking up early to like check on the cactus. We also had ideas for like, okay, like how many units of water have they given their cactus over the span of
Hmm.
the life of the cactus, right? So that's
That's
that
a good
long
one.
tail. Right, that's that long tail reward for keeping the cactus and watering it over time. We
Yeah.
also had like,
Actually, to jump in there,
mhm,
that's something I find when I am working with partners that I work with when I'm doing my work at Amazon, part of my normal day job. The thing that people forget most, especially in game skills, is, and this is such a driver for people, is asking about their progress and their stats, and they want to know how many of something they have or how many hours they played or whatever it is. So there's always that inclination for people to ask, and I see this left out of scope documents a lot is people asking those questions. So what we did there was put ourselves in the shoes of our player and said, well, what are they gonna ask about in general? Um, that the talk about the water badge actually prompted the discussion about tracking stats. And we should just be able to ask for those things anyway. So we came up with things. I'm gonna do the um, so you might do something like tracking milestones,
right,
such as like you've drunk 100 gallons of water, or you're 100 days old today,
yes,
birthdays.
we did do
Your
that.
cactus reaches different levels of maturity, and that will be announced. So you'll have a sprout, you'll have a toddler, you'll have a teenager, you'll have a geriatric cactus at some point. So those are milestones, and then we came up with, okay, well, now we want this has prompted a discussion about stats. So what kind of stats do we want to track? And that was gallons drunk.
Yep, and then we also had
And we actually calculated that into a water bill, but I'm not sure if that's made it into the
that
skill
was
yet.
that was something, yeah, that we were talking about, like figuring out how much money it would have taken to
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 actually water your cactus.
right.
Yeah.
That didn't make it into the skill, but it wouldn't be. I left in a constant that has like um that translates roughly like what our unit per gallon is, and then we could come up with some math to configure that. So we have the ability to do that with what we end up creating, but we haven't built that out. But it wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
Another like milestone that we created was like time based, and Allison touched on this earlier. So it's like how many days your cactus has survived, and we had like I think what 1 day, 2 days, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then like it keeps going on from there. We also had like a specific badge for like its birthday. So that's the sort of the same as the it's similar but different, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
same uh sort of reward for hitting that milestone, but like, it's also like, hey, happy birthday. And we had come up with the idea of having the skill like singing happy birthday to you once the skill, or at least celebrating your birthday in some way. But we were like, okay, this is part of that scoping thing, right? Like, there's no way that the user is going to be able to time travel. So we've got, from the time the skill goes live, we've got 365 days um, to like come up with a solution on what we're going to do. And not really the player's birthday, but the cactus's birthday. Um,
Oh,
because yeah, right, because if I open the skill today, today's not my birthday, and I play it for the first time, that cactus
yeah,
is born on the day that I
yeah.
opened and started the skill, right? So if we've kept
Even,
that.
yeah, you're right. Even if our beta testers did not kill their cacti ever, um, it would be a long time before we need to come up with that birthday solution. You are correct.
Right, right. And then we also decided to give badges for funny like situations, like, or not really funny, but sad situations, like where the cactus maybe died for the first time, right? Or we
Mhm.
also had one going in for, let's say the cactus was very close to dying, but then you saved it, right? So it's like, rewarding that as well. So it's like, oops, the cactus got neglected. It was just about to die, and you nursed it back to health by taking care of it properly, and getting back up, like, so various different types of mechanisms to keep people coming back, to reward them for their behavior, for interacting with the skill over and over
Yep.
and over again. um,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and that this all goes into keeping the skill sticky. And part of that is, surprising, delighting, and um, making these things like the skill like communicate to the user that it's aware of the situation, and providing good feedback to the user that, hey, what you're doing matters in this game.
Right. So another few things we did to add to delight to kind of wrap up the main features and some of the things that we also discarded. There, so we've got when the cactus is healthy that day, when you check on it, we want to reward you. So I mentioned earlier we have cactus wisdom, and that's only you only get that when the cactus is healthy and it has no needs. If you check on your cactus and it has needs, you'll be informed of that and asked how you want to act on that. The cactus won't speak to you. You only get a friendly conversation if the cactus is healthy. And then of course if like it's dead, something happens.
Right.
So over the course of writing the script, and you're going to see this at work when we do storyboarding, is I also added a little bit of scope creep. So for example, when our let's just have that conversation, what happens when a cactus dies? The well, it can die in a number of ways, and we'll show you those storyboards later, but we were actually like, well, it could die from overwatering, it could die from underwatering, it could die because of just overall poor health. And we tried to count all of the ways that you could actually cause the cactus's death, and I wrote a eulogy for every single type. And that was my personal scope creep that day. So
Right.
it happens, but we discuss it and we ask what is it going to add to the situation, and we're careful about the scope that we add. Often, if it's a script change and it doesn't need a lot of logic, it's okay. But if you have those ideas early on, definitely put them out there. But
Right.
again, leave wiggle room, because you might come up with something great that's really delightful. And some of the things that we came up with along the way are like the best parts of the skill, and we were flexible with that.
Right. And one other thing, we wanted to also reward the user with was like, how do we like add some character to the game? And that is via using poly voices for each of the cacti. So like, each cacti, we're like, hey, we could give it a poly voice, and when the cactus speaks and gives its cactusism, it's going to speak in a different voice than Alexa, right? So Alexa's voice is the narrator of the game. So Alexa's voice is going to introduce the skill when you and what and how to use the skill when you first start playing. When you
Yep.
ask for help, Alexa's going to respond. when you try to water the cactus and let's say the cactus, you don't have a cactus at that point, right? Like Alexa's going to say, hey, you're trying to water the cactus, but you don't have one yet, right? Or if the cactus passes away, like your cactus isn't going to read its eulogy, right? Alexa's going to read the eulogy. But when the skill speaks, sorry, when the cactus speaks, it's like we need something to like differentiate the fact that the cactus is speaking versus Alexa. And so it's like, okay, let's use Polly for that. Or the other question was, do we use voiceover? Do we have like pre-recorded audio from do we go out and pay voice actors to do that?
Yep.
And then
These are all conversations for the scope discussion for sure. Also, I wrote in here GUI, graphical user interface, what's going to be happening on the screen, to what extent are you going to support those devices? I saw somebody mention show 10 in here, a little defeat, again, amazing idea. That comes with its own that actually splits the customer experience. You're doing something special for those customers because that device has other capabilities. That's worth stating in the scope, is how those other technologies are actually going to affect the skill. So something like notifications and reminders we talked about. Do I get a notification if my cactus is in dire health suddenly? Can I sign up for a daily reminder or a weekly reminder to check my cactus? Yeah, I should do both. Why not? If it's going to drive retention and engagement, heck yeah. Let's experiment with that. So, which we're not yet, by the way. So we had to make a decision. But is there any other tech we're using? And it turns out, enter Joe Muyo with Web API, and then enter, whatever thing we're going to launch at the event at Alexa Live next year that we can put in the skill. So part of the scope discussion could also and should also be catching up on some latest technologies that actually enable really delightful customer experiences, and you can get a lot of inspiration from those things that you should be including in your scope document. So that is another step that you're going to want to take, is look at what kinds of technologies are going to enable great experiences that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before.
Right. And the other thing that we also went through the exercise of, like, cutting down the scope and going, okay, what are the things that are absolutely necessary for the skill to be able to, function and to be interesting and to get people coming back? Let's optimize the experience and what we build based upon that, and then determine, hey, this is a nice to have, and like, figure out what we're going to do in the future. Maybe we start off with this MVP, this minimum viable product, and then depending upon how well the game is received, add more to it, right? So if it's popular enough, and if it gets enough traction and people are clamoring for things, go out there and build, right? Because there's a temptation with anything that you build to delay releasing it until it's absolutely perfect. But typically what ends up happening is if it just never gets delayed, because there's always an excuse to push it back. Like I always think about software in general, is it's never complete. Software is never complete until it's no longer supported. At that point, it's done, right? So you're constantly, updating and adding new features, making refinements based upon user feedback, based upon new technologies, based upon refactoring, getting rid of technical debt. There's all sorts of things that you can do to make software better. So software is never 100% done until that software is no longer supported.
Yes. So now that's a good segue into, we did have to get out the scissors, and we actually had to do some research too over what was the technical debt we would be incurring with some of these things. Some of these things we didn't even know, and that's all. And we're going to talk about this later when we talk about this interaction between a designer and a developer, because sometimes I will suggest something, I don't really know what I'm asking technically, and somebody can tell me what I'm asking technically, and I can refine our design report if that's too much, or not even possible. Sometimes I suggest things that are not even possible, and my colleagues are good at telling me that I'm crazy and that's not possible. And then I go to another team and try to find out why that's not possible. But in general, it's a good scoping activity to explore those kind of things. So we ask ourselves a few questions again when we're looking at the scope document. And I ask these questions whenever somebody gives me a scope document to look at and ask my opinion on whether it's going to meet the goals of the project, and so on and so forth. So, of course, are we meeting our basic expectations? Well, looking back at our feature list, let me pull that guy up again. Sticky note, where'd you go? There you are. Where's my slide, though? Come on, guys. Well, now my slide's gone. That's awesome.
I think it's because you're zoomed. Scroll a little. There you go.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, so, but where's the next slide? It disappeared. It just deleted it.
Huh.
It's gone. My slide is gone. It ate it. Did anybody see what happened? Oh my gosh. Okay, anyway, well, let's what I really wanted was a sticky note. So what did we take the scissors to? Well, obviously implementing like notifications and reminders. Keep in mind that a lot of these things come with permissions and additional CX needs. So if I'm going to set a reminder, I need to go look at the tech docs for that, and I'm going to discover that there are some CX requirements, which includes I need to be able to set the reminder for certain times. I need to be able to cancel and modify my reminder, and your skill has to support all of that. So by taking on that scope, we are taking on the requirements of using that technology. So we had to have that discussion, and that was one thing that we threw out. Joe is going to have a blast talking about this stuff when we talk about Web API and APL. We had a ton of ideas for that. So, of course, we're showing you the cactus, but then we talked about if you were to just touch the cactus, it could like wiggle a little bit. That would be one of those delighter moments that we talked about including in the scope.
Right.
Possibly at some point it does a little dance. There was also an idea for a touch interaction game, perhaps even something that affects your health. Like if a cobweb shows up on your cactus, it's going to drain your health until you go over there and like clear it off with your finger. But be careful.
Right. Yes, because you could poke yourself too.
What other great stuff did we cut? So we're coming up on the hour. We've got a really good scope here. I'm going to clean up this list and we're going to use it in our next stream. Let me go full screen again so we can look at the schedule. Let's talk about next time and what we're going to do next. We're going to maybe see that slide again. Oh yeah, that slide came back. So, and of course, at the end of the day, we sit down and say, is this product going to meet our goals? Are people going to like this game? And we also shop that idea around. Hey, would you play this? Or hey, here's what I'm working on. And when I told my boss what I was working on, he laughed, and I thought, well, I'm on track. So you want to ask that question, and now you've got a scope. You can now we can write a script. So right. That's what we're going to start doing tomorrow.
Or Friday.
Not tomorrow, Friday. It's basically tomorrow.
Right. So yes, on Friday, we're going to be creating our first storyboards. I'm going to attempt with Allison's direction to and you can follow along and point and laugh as I try to, build out the voice simulation via a flowchart to show how difficult it is, especially trying to represent all the different various states of a game with voice on top of it. Yep. We'll find that it's very difficult. Like creating a state, a flowchart that shows okay, here are the things that are going to happen when it's daytime versus nighttime. That's perfectly fine in that situation, but trying to represent or layer on top of it what the user could say at these particular moments is going to make it difficult. And so we'll start showing the first storyboards and how the storyboards represent this this conversation that takes place between the user and the skill, and takes into the situation at hand, okay, what's going on? It's nighttime and the user asks to open the blinds, or the other case where the user asks to open the blinds when the blinds are already open, right? So like these
Yep.
are different like scenarios that will show. And Allison, if you want to speak to what technologies you'll be using,
Yeah.
sort of to
Yeah.
tease
So
what you'll be doing on the next stream.
yeah, so we're gonna after I shout orders at Justin and he makes us a flow chart. You're gonna see a moment tomorrow where we're just gonna have a lot of factors
Friday.
in play and so, geez, Louise, I need a swear jar for that. So there will be a lot of factors in play, and we see right away when we open the skill, we've got, if we implemented all of our ideas, our skill needs to make like 15 decisions before it's going to surface something that's relevant. The right cactus at the right size in the right status, that sort of thing. So then I'm going to do the same activity with storyboards. I'm going to be using Adobe XD, and I'll talk about some other resources that you can use. But also, I'll share a template with you as well when we finish up our storyboard. So for 2 episodes, we're going to be working on some storyboards. Tomorrow, we're just going to finish a happy path through the skill. Friday, we're going to finish a happy path through the skill. And then on Wednesday of next week, we're going to go through all of them. And then we will spend an episode just going through and testing them and finding the places that we missed. And like Justin said, we found some things that, I asked to make a new cactus when I already had one. And now I need to ask if you're sure you want to do that, because I don't want to trash your cactus right away. And all of these different things that we didn't need to figure out in the scoping phase, but now we need to design. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We'll call some of these things out, like, oh yeah, this was a scenario that we missed, and while I was implementing it, figured it out. Like, oh hey, there's this situation that we didn't account for. And what I would do when I was building those out and writing code, I would put it to do and be like, ask Allison about this. Ask Allison, like, brainstorm about this particular, like, what to do in this case.
yep.
And
Yep.
somebody asked in the chat here, Minicus7, will this series be available as a list here or on YouTube? So yes, we're going to make a list, like a playlist here on. I know Twitch doesn't really have playlists, but like we're gonna create like a group to keep all of these episodes in it, and then yes, they will also be uploaded to YouTube as well. So I'm going to start like curating the list here on Twitch. I'm not sure when they will be uploaded to YouTube, but they will eventually find their way over there as well.
Yeah, so there's going to be in GitHub, in that Git repo, you will see, once we've added some more resources, you will see a README in there at some point that we are going to put, and there will be links to all of the different resources, like, and the most up-to-date resources. So when we do update that README will also be updated to link you to the latest like YouTube playlist and all of that. So that'll be kind of your go-to jumping off point to find that stuff, is that GitHub repo when we put the README in there.
Cool.
Great.
I like that little defeat. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Friday.
Yep. Someone owes the swear jar, and then eventually the tomorrow. I'm gonna do this every Wednesday. I think I'll be saying it. So I'll just start a jar now, and then we'll have a little contest or something, and I'll buy somebody a cactus with my swear jar. So
I like it.
let's do that. So awesome. We'll see everybody Friday. I'll with our scope list and a bunch of blank storyboards to get started on our script.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. As the slide says, we'll be prickled to see you again. Allison is a master at writing great puns, and we have plenty of them in the skill.
Yep. All over the skill. Jokes and puns. Jokes and
Yes.
puns.
Joe is also really good at doing that too. So
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, puns are also encouraged in the chat from here on out.
Yes.
Lay it on us.
Yeah, and if you come up with a particularly good pun, we will definitely, get it into the skill somehow.
Oh, it'll go in the Also, cactus names. I'm open to those too.
Yes,
because not only for the skill, but also I have so many cacti, they don't all have names. So
Right. Yes, we have Sharpie Sharp. And then what was it? I think we also have one Steph Sharp or something like that. I can't remember
Oh yeah,
exactly
Steph
what.
Sharp, because that's somebody on our team who is literally, her name is Steph Sharp, but
Yes.
she appears in the skill as well.
Yes. So
Yep.
fun
There are
stuff.
some good ones.
Yes. Yeah. It was so funny. We were coming up with the names, and I'm like, you had some other Sharp name, and I'm like, why don't we just put Steph Sharp in here? So
Yep. Yep.
yes. All
Oh
right.
man, we're gonna have to do like a cactus name of the day or something to share all of you. Or maybe I'll put a joke of the day on these slides because there's just so much content that we came up with. It's pretty great. But also, if you're looking for the beta, we will share how to sign up for that soon. We're still testing with our limited pool. We're not quite ready to share it widely,
Yes.
but everybody on the stream will be the first to know how to sign up for that, and we'll sign you up for it.
Yes.
But
And
right now we're just testing internally.
yeah, and that's to make things clear. We are actually going to be publishing this skill live into the skill store. So, um, at
That's
some
what we
point it
mean
will
in the
be
calendar by launch party. The skill will be
yes.
live by December 18th. Merry Christmas.
All right. Well, great. I know we're over on time, but
Yep.
um, you know, and thank you all for tuning in. And we will be back at the same time on Friday. So that is Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see you then. Till next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.